have nothing more to say on that line other than it's awful. Hi, hello there, how are you doing? My name's Serena. Thank you for clicking on this video. Today I am going to be talking about Eleanor in Park by Rainbow Rowell, and I have thoughts. This doesn't look like that many sticky notes, but considering I haven't annotated a book like this since high school, and I felt the need to with this one, is just, it's not promising. So about the plot, I'm just gonna keep that brief. Eleanor in Park is about two teenagers, Eleanor in Park. Eleanor is white, Park is half white, half Korean American. That becomes important. They strike up a friendship when Eleanor transfers to Park's school, and then a romantic relationship develops from that point on, and it's just a story about them and how they are each other's first love and all that. Like, it's very sweet in theory. In practice, it's just like a dumpster fire, but we'll get to that. I think, like, as a whole, Rainbow Rowell is a talented and capable writer. If this book hadn't left such a sour taste in my mouth, I would maybe be eager to check out her other works, because I do think the story, the book, just overall, it's well-rounded, but there is so much racism and so many glaring issues that it takes away from the good that this book has to offer, you know? I'm gonna talk about a few things. I'm gonna talk about the characterization of Park, characterization of his mother, the comparisons between Park and his brother Josh, the treatment of Eleanor's best friends, Beebi and Denice, and just sort of Rainbow Rowell's response to criticism and questions about this book. There are just also quotes that did not fit into any of those categories, so I am going to just quick fire talk about them right now because they are a doozy. At one point, Park's friend says, "Your people come from the jungle," and Park sort of disputes that, and then he says, "Apocalypse Now, anyone?" And isn't Apocalypse Now about Vietnam? At one point, Eleanor says maybe he was Filipino. Was that in Asia? Probably. Asia's out of control, huge. Why would you make your main character sound so ignorant like that? Like, I already don't find Eleanor a likable character, and then she kept saying things, I'm gonna talk about this a little bit more later, but she kept saying things that were like ignorant at best and racist at worst. I need to pull the book out for this one. So Eleanor and her mom are talking about a girl in the neighborhood who has fallen pregnant. She's like a teenage girl, Eleanor's age, and this is just what they have to say on this page. "Tracy got involved with a boy in the neighborhood, a black boy. Eileen's husband is having a fit." "I don't remember them," Eleanor said. "The tub was almost full enough to rinse her hair." "Well, it just made me think about how lucky I am," her mom said. To which Eleanor replies with, "That you didn't get involved with a black guy." Oh, there's one other random quote that did not fall into the racism category, but at one point Park says, not out loud, but like in his narration, "Is it possible to rape somebody's hand?" Ugh. I just... Am I allowed to say that on the internet? Probably. I think that's just really gross to say. It trivializes sexual assault to a degree. It feels very out of character for Park, who seems to be more mature and sensitive than his peers and his classmates and stuff. I read it and I was like, that is really jarring coming from him, and just reading it, like, why would you say, "Is it possible to rape somebody's hand," when he's talking about like this sweet moment with the girl he like? I just think it's gross. So in a book full of racism, you have that line too. A lot of people will try to defend this book by using it took place in the 80s, so it's okay that the characters are racist. Yes and no. So of course it's the 80s. People are going to be more racist than they are now. People are still racist now, but like, we all know it was worse in the 80s. And that's fine. It is fine to have flawed characters, it is fine to have mean characters, it is fine to have racist characters. But when Rainbow Rowell clearly didn't do enough research on the Korean American experience, or isn't there like an editor of some sort that could have just given this a once over and said this is not okay? When white authors write about racism with no consultants or research or seemingly any effort for the most part, that is where the issues start. The excuse of, oh, it takes place in the 1980s. It's not okay because the writing is racist. It's not just the characters. This is where things really start to get bad, and we have barely started. So first I'll talk about Park and his younger brother Josh, and just how the comparisons between them are super icky and weird and just not written well. Josh's white traits, he is described as being tall and fit on multiple occasions, whereas it is repeatedly mentioned that Park is like small and scrawny and just like this delicate little girly. They describe him as very feminine and girly on multiple occasions, which is just like a stereotype about Asian men. They're always being emasculated in the media and by people in real life. So it's gross to see it happen, and being written by a white author. It doesn't help that Park's dad seems to favor Josh and compares him to Josh in a lot of ways that again emasculate him. His dad rats on him for wearing eyeliner and for not being able to drive stick. Is that it? I don't drive. Basically, Park's dad just sort of picks on him or is hard on him for things that Rainbow Rowell has attached to his otherness. And that's not okay. That's all I have to say really on the Park and Josh stuff. Their relationship is really surface level. I was expecting to see more of Josh in this book, and you really don't, which is probably for the best if this was how Rainbow Rowell was gonna treat not their relationship, but just how she was gonna talk about Josh every time he was relevant, because it was really obnoxious just to almost every time he was in a scene, it seemed like she was mentioning how he was superior to Park because of these white traits that he possessed that Park didn't. And awful, awful, awful. I keep looking down. It's because I have my laptop, because I took so many notes. So I'm gonna just talk about Beebi and Denice, who are Eleanor's friends. They're her only friends at school. They're also the only black people that ever have lines in this book. And you can tell that they're the only black people in this book because Rainbow Rowell is super lazy with how she writes them. First of all, they don't have any characterization past being Eleanor's friends and being made up of like black stereotypes. They're both portrayed as like the feisty, sassy black girl. I think they make jokes about fighting the girls who are bullying Eleanor, but in a very, like, again, feisty, sassy black girl, stereotypical sort of way. They feel like caricatures in a movie from like 1992, and it's awful. It feels like they were put there so that she could be like, oh, look, my book is even more diverse. Whereas they just have no plot development, or like they're not relevant. You could have taken them out of the book and it would have made no difference, because Eleanor, I don't think she hangs out with them outside of school. I honestly think they maybe have 5 scenes with her. Just, if this is apparently getting a movie, I don't know if that movie is still happening because of all the discourse and the problems that have been raised. But you could cut them out of an Eleanor and Park movie and no one would miss them because they didn't have any purpose. These are her only friends. Like, they are the only people other than Park that are nice to her at school. They could be so important to this story, and they're just not. And the way they're written is very lazy and fake. The slang between them just doesn't feel organic. It feels like Rainbow Rowell was writing a racist SNL sketch. They're so poorly written and I hate it. This is not really a racist part, but it is just more about Beebi and Denice, so it goes along with what I've said a little bit about Eleanor not being likable. So she critiques Denice's looks and outfit like really harshly in one of the chapters, and as Eleanor she's being made fun of throughout like the whole book for how she looks and how she dresses. I just found it appalling that she would make fun of one of the only people in school who has shown her friendship and kindness, that she would make fun of the way she dresses. That's all I have to say on Beebi and Denice and how they just, Rainbow Rowell did them dirty and made them little sad side characters who had no personality past their stereotypes. Park's mom is the only character who is treated worse than Park in terms of how she's described and just the racism surrounding her character. One of the first quotes that introduces us to Park's mom is said by Park in his part of the narration. It is, except she said it in Hia because she was apparently never going to stop sounding like she just got here yesterday. And like I felt gross just saying that out loud. Like I considered not saying that quote out loud because it's offensive. Like I just don't, it doesn't sit right with me that this white author made fun of a foreign person's accent, because doing it through the lens of her son, who is the same, like, who is also a person of color, that doesn't make it okay because you know a white author's doing it. She moved to America as an adult. She's still gonna have her native accent. It's just such an ignorant sentence, and that only like scratches the surface of how awful the characterization of Park's mom is. A lot of her dialogue is in broken English, which, you know, fine. A lot of immigrants speak in broken English. It's like their second or third language sometimes. Obviously, like they might not have a proper grasp on things, but it just feels like it was written by a 12-year-old boy trying to be funny and making fun of accents. It's just straight up mockery. Like the way she misses words and stuff and the way she pronounces Eleanor's name. And it's bad enough that Park points it out, but it feels even worse when Eleanor is the one talking about her accent. It just, it really rubs me the wrong way. It's just so gross coming from a white author who is zero right to be poking fun at a Korean accent. Very early on in the book, I think it's her first introduction to us, Park describes his mom or compares her to one of the dolls in It's a Small World at Disney World, which, oh my god, it's so upsetting to see this teenage boy who otherwise seems very kind and very mature speak about his own mother this way. I just don't think you should compare minorities to the dolls, which are, I wouldn't say It's a Small World is offensive, but it's a very like shallow look at race and diversity. I could get into a whole other talk about racism in the Disney parks if I wanted to, but it's just, at its core, it's a very shallow look at race. Just comparing her to a doll that is a caricature of a nationality is, it's not good when put together with everything else I'm about to talk about. We can't talk about Park's mom and the characterization of her without talking about the relationship between her and Park's dad. It is just classic white savior trope. White man, Park's dad, went to Asia during the war, met Park's mom, an Asian woman, and brought her back to America, saved her from her homeland, brought her to the better place, all that nonsense. Did that happen? Sure, white men fell in love in Asia and brought these women back to start lives with them. Yes, that happened, but when it is written by a white woman who does not know anything about that, and the rest of this book tells us that she did little to no research about Korean people, I feel like she was like, I know this happened, how can I make it realistic that this biracial family exists in America? She was like, no, he met her and swept her away from everything and everyone she knows because white savior trope. And again, these situations did happen in real life. There are many negative connotations with not even just the trope when it's done in fiction, but with the idea that these white men went to Asia and struck up relationships with women who lived in towns their armies were occupying. Like, there are some very gross connotations and conditions there, but it is one thing to say that that happened and we can assume that it was a perfectly good and fine healthy relationship the whole time, but then we have a quote like this one. Eleanor imagined Park's dad, Tom Selleck, tucking his dainty china person into his flak jacket and sneaking her out of Korea. The reason Eleanor refers to her as a dainty china person is because a few lines before she's comparing his mom to a china doll, which again, not good, but dainty china person right before mentioning you're sneaking her out of Korea, it's like you're doing this weird display of ignorance again, and it's so frequent, and I don't know why. It just puts a really bad taste in my mouth. I keep looking at it. I read it, and it was one of the many lines where I read it and I was like, did I just read that right? And I went back and I read it again. I was like, oh no, this actually happened. This was actually published recently. Oh my god. I don't know if I'm being too sensitive when calling her a dainty china person right before mentioning again that she is Korean. I don't know if I'm being too sensitive, but it really bothers me, and it equates that all Asians are the same or interchangeable in a way that grosses me out. I have nothing more to say on that line other than it's awful. That's sort of the gist of the treatment of Park's mom. She's treated terribly. Her characterization is also pretty non-existent. It is just stereotypes. Again, she's very meek, she's very feminine, she doesn't work in a salon, she owns her own salon. And yes, there are Asian women who are all of those things, but it really just feels like she picked the most East Asian stereotypes and ran with them. How are you gonna be writing people of color and like thinking you've written this diverse book when it's just offensive and lazy? That's the thing. Whether or not she was intending to be offensive while writing this novel, I doubt that was her intent. I doubt this book is malicious in any way. I do not think she was purposefully trying to make a mockery out of East Asians, out of Koreans, out of Black people. I don't think that. But the laziness and the lack of care that she has shown towards these characters of color is just frustrating, and it's upsetting, and it's just annoying that this book got so much hype for, you know, like being representative of Asian people, and this is what we get. Now we gotta get on to talking about Park, and oh boy, it is like this just keeps getting worse. I kept reading this book hoping that the racism would stop, that maybe like once all the characters had been described, albeit offensively, like it would simmer, it would go away. But no, the racism really went till nearly the end of the book, and it was awful. I'm just gonna start reading the quotes I took down and talking about them. This one made me say oof out loud, and I was just floored that it made it into this book, like it made it past the editors. This is from Eleanor's perspective. Park's eyes went wide. Well, sort of wide. Sometimes she wondered if the shape of his eyes affected how he saw things. That was probably the most racist question of all time. Yes. Yes, it is. Like, the fact that the character acknowledges that it is extremely racist does not make it any better. It just sort of makes her seem like an idiot. Like, is that harsh? No, I don't think so. Rainbow Rowell, why would you write that? And character of Eleanor, like, why would you think that? Why would you say that? It's just so stupid and ignorant and racist. This sort of circles back to the comparisons and the contrasting of Park and his brother Josh. It's said in a page where Park is like talking about the differences and the similarities or lack thereof between him and his brother. And it is maybe the Korean genes scrambled everything, which is gross because off the bat he is implying that the Korean genes messed up the way he looks, because he's using it to explain like why he isn't tall or the way his brother is, why he isn't super white looking like the white side of his family. Just, oh my god. In that same breath, because he's talking about his brother's looks, again talking about how his brother is the whiter looking one in a way and a tone that praises his brother for not looking like a minority. He says about his brother, his eyes were brown and just barely almondy. Almond flavored. There's a few things to unpack with that. It is just such textbook bad, lazy writing describing someone's eyes as almond shaped. Why would you describe someone's eyes as almond shaped and then calling them almond flavored? People of color already, we struggle with like being compared to food, like ignoring the fact that we get called things like exotic all the time, which feels sort of weird. It's like someone's comparing me to a fruit. But like if you go look at makeup for darker skin tones, they go from things like fair and porcelain and stuff like that to honey and caramel and just more food items, which is obnoxious, but it is what it is, I guess. Anyways, comparing people of color to food aside, which Eleanor does, she describes his skin as like honey at some points. Didn't bother me that much, like it wasn't great, but in the grand scheme of this book, it was on the nicer side of things said about Park, so I just sort of let it slide. Yeah, I just thought it was unnecessary to describe his eyes as barely almondy, almond flavored. Like, I don't know, it's just weird. You could have been straightforward and said Park had monolids, his brother did not. I am not East Asian, so I cannot talk about what is an inoffensive way to go about describing the difference in their eyes, but I know that saying his eyes were barely almondy compared to Park's was not the way to do it. Park is emasculated a lot in this book. I've already mentioned that with his dad and his brother, but at one point, one of the boys at school says to Park, "I think she feels safe with you because you're like half girl," and then goes on to list all the reasons he is half girl. Asian men are so frequently emasculated and fetishized simultaneously by white people, and it's really upsetting to see in a book where, oh my god, the Asian guy is the romantic lead, this is exciting, this will be positive representation, and he's still treated like garbage by the characters and by the author. There's nothing wrong with a man being pretty or feminine or anything of that variety. Like, screw gender roles, it should not matter. But the way that Park is described, it feels like exactly what it is, a white author taking, again, Asian stereotypes and slapping them onto a character when she had the opportunity to make this meaningful representation. This really bothered me, and again, I wondered if I was being too sensitive, but I don't know, it felt really weird to me. So Eleanor calls Park stupid Asian kid multiple times before they start being friends, and then I think she calls him stupid Asian kid like 2 times before they become friends, and then they start warming up to one another, and I think she calls him stupid Asian kid one more time, and then like they developed a romantic relationship, and I said, thank God I will never have to hear her call him stupid Asian kid again, because that's super rude. And sure enough, on page 310, very close to the end of the book, she called him stupid, beautiful Asian kid, and I groaned out loud. So I hated this choice to have her call him stupid Asian kid, because, you know, it's rude and like very racist. I did not have any reason to like this character, and then she's calling this guy who is more or less being like civil to her in a space where everyone is bullying her, calling him stupid Asian kid. I don't know, it just felt dumb. And it's one of those things where if he was a white guy, Rainbow Rowell would not have made her say stupid white guy. So, way to keep making your character unlikable and just seems sort of rude, especially when they're becoming friends and she's still doing it. I'm like, it's not like he's just doing the bare minimum and being nice to you now, Eleanor. Like, he's showing you so much kindness and you guys are becoming buddies. Why are you calling him stupid Asian kid? And then when it made its way back around at the end, she called him stupid beautiful Asian kid. Oh my god, I hated it so much. Like, the eye roll I did, oh, so stupid. I feel like Rainbow Rowell thought it would be a nice little callback, and it just reminded me of why I don't like this character. Like, that's not poetic, that's just reminding me of how rude she was to him. Fuck's sake. I think I've already said this once, but it just painted her as at best an ignorant character and at worst a racist one. I'm not gonna want these two to be in a relationship if the one is being racist to the minority. Like, absolutely not. Lastly, I just want to talk about Rainbow Rowell's response or lack thereof to the criticism of this. Both of the threads I'm linking below go into more detail about that, so recommend checking those out to see how she has handled this situation. Literally, she either ignores or blocks or deletes comments and questions critiquing her work and critiquing these choices, and sometimes it isn't even a harsh critique or people being mean to her. They're asking her valid questions about something that has offended them, and she responds by deleting their comment or blocking them so they can't ask her any more questions. And that is just some classic avoidance and knowing you did something wrong but not wanting to own up to it. Like, there is no problem. So many people in the public eye have said things or done things that are offensive and harmful, and they recognize those mistakes and they apologize and they learn and they promise to do better. Rainbow Rowell has addressed one of the biggest problems that people bring up, which is, why does Park have a Korean family name as his first name? It's very J.K. Rowling of her with Cho Chang. Cho is not a first name traditionally. It can be, but it very frequently is not. So it just shows, again, a lack of research, a lack of work, when you could very, very easily do some research and find out what people from these cultures actually name their children. Anyways, here is her response on the frequently asked questions on her website. My backstory for Park's name was that Park is his mom's family name and that his parents thought it would be nice for him to have both their names, Park and Sheridan. This is fairly common in American families, circle back to that, to use the mom's maiden name as the kid's first or middle name. It's a tradition in my family. I was also thinking about how in lots of families, the oldest kid has a more unusual name, like Rainbow, and then the parents decide to play it safer with the younger kids. My brother is literally named Jerry. She mentions it being common in American families and in her family personally. Again, great that that's a thing in her family. That's fun and nice and whatnot, but this is not her experience. She does not know if a Korean parent would want to do that. She's not writing about her experience. I am not Korean, so I don't know what their name traditions are, but I don't think it's right that she is using her experience as a white American to guess at what they might want to do in order to keep his culture. I'm not in her head. I cannot speak on behalf of the characters she has written, but it does just feel lazy to say, oh, they wanted to use both of their last names, when I think more parents, instead of saying, oh, I want to give this, like, carry on this part of my culture to my child, I think they would get more creative and give their child a name that, like, an actual first name that comes from that culture, instead of saying, oh, they can just have my surname, or maybe they would hyphenate the surnames. And I don't know, that would have been an interesting writing opportunity. She could have found a Korean first name that was symbolic of something in the relationship between Park's parents. Like, it was an interesting opportunity to add a layer to the story, whereas she never explains that his mom or his dad wanted him to have, like, that Korean part of him reflected in his name. So when she's saying it after the fact on the frequently asked questions, after people have been like, that's incorrect, I don't know, just say it again. Lazy writing. My last thoughts are, don't read this. If you do read this, just beware for the shitstorm that it is. I had watched one YouTube video and I had seen the Twitter thread before reading this book, and it's one thing to see all the quotes and stuff out of context and be like, oh, that's really bad, and then to see it in the book and be like, oh damn, that is actually in there, that was actually allowed to be published. Sort of wild. I'm rambling and talking too much. Thank you very much for watching and making it to the end of this rant. Hopefully I can talk about books with you again sometime soon, but hopefully it is something more positive. but I have an idea of the next video I want to film, not fully book related and not really positive, so maybe I'm just having a ranty phase. Anyways, that is future me's problem. Thank you very much. My socials are below. Have a nice day. Bye!